Hi, everyone. I am so excited to share that we have Bill Ruddick here today. We will be recording today's meeting. We will be speaking from the perspective of an expert in the college application process. So I could not be happier to share that we have the best of the best coming today, straight from Kweller Prep, an expert with over 25 years of experience in college counseling and consulting, none other than Bill Ruddick, who also served as the PTA president of Townsend Harris High School. It brings me great pleasure to introduce Bill right now. And you, without further ado, here we go. We can't wait to learn about smaller liberal arts colleges. Have a wonderful webinar.
Good evening, parents. It's Bill Reddick. Thank you for those words, Francis. So Kweller Prep has an active and successful college advice practice, and we provide this for the community. And this year, we're hopefully helping our regular parents, Kweller Prep parents, and Hunter parents. So welcome. I hope this is going to be worth your while. There are actually 17 presentations. We've done 3 so far. I'm giving the next 2, and Francis and I have agreed to actually add one. So it was 16, now it's 17 presentations. I'm going to talk about that in more details in a few moments, but we're going to add a webinar just on financial aid. And that is his in the past been one of the most popular webinars on financial aid. Every aspect of it. So it's a must see because it's going to really help parents understand the process, how to maximize the amount of aid, strategies, lots of good stuff there. Let me actually suggest that parents, it actually helps me to have questions because sometimes I go too fast or it's confusing, and sometimes the slides aren't clear, or maybe I make a mistake. So getting the feedback is really helpful. And at the end, I'm going to open up the mic. It just helps to just get around myself to hear from parents, and if there are students, of course, everyone is welcome. But it really gives me the feedback. So I'm going to keep encouraging you to chat me a question, and at the end, you can either chat or actually ask the question. Okay. All right. So today we're going to. It's an hour. So just have an hour. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. Because I have a lot to cover. We're going to talk about small colleges, public flagship colleges, and how to pay for it. Try to mix the financial aid into all the presentations that I do, because obviously it's a big part of it. Okay, so Francis alluded to a little bit of my background. So besides working for Kweller Prep and giving private college advice for about, I guess it's been about 12 years, I've been an admissions recruiter coordinating with the Office of Admissions for the University of Michigan for 22 years. So I have a lot of experience. And I was PTA president partly because I had all this information and I wanted to share it with parents who are going through this process for the first time. So when my son was a student at Townsend Harris High School, I stepped up and joined the PTA board and as PTA president. Okay, so this is just a quick look at where we're at. This is the 4th one. So next week is a really good one too. Those daunting essays. I'm going to talk about how to write them in every possible dimension. So it's going to be very interesting. So stay tuned for next week, same time, Thursday at 7. Okay, so this is what was added to that list. Oh, by the way, let me just share that with you right off the bat. So this is actually at the end, all the documents that are shared to make it easier. I'm just going to share it at the end. Let me just chat this one exception. I'll do this, and then all the others I'll send at the end, if that's okay. And this is for everybody here. So this is the schedule of fellow webinars. So you all have that. And there it is. Okay, you guys could chat at that. Okay. So please chat me any as I go along. I'm not going to stop for every question, but if something comes up, it actually will help me. Actually, if I say something, it's unclear, please chat me so I can know. That's one of the frustrating things about doing a Zoom. I don't see faces, and so it's like it's hard to get kind of the reaction. So I've trained myself, but I really benefit from getting the feedback. Okay, so let's go. So the way I always begin this thing is kind of like I always try to take a step back. Let's look at the big picture. There are 2,000 colleges in the country, and ultimately the list that the student will eventually go with in their senior year will probably only have 10 or 12 or so. So the question is, you want them to be the right ones because the school that you go to will have to be from that list. So that's a really big deal. So we're going to focus today on two of the categories. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on the SUNYs, which we talked about last week, the CUNYs, so that's the New York State public system. Of course, you have the famous privates, which go well beyond the Ivy League, but those get the most attention. University of Rochester, Syracuse, Tulane, Northwestern, Northeastern, Duke. I mean, those are the most famous schools. They're large. They have a lot of money. So there are two categories of colleges that we're going to look at today, and then the financial aid. So the first ones are liberal arts colleges. Then I'm going to look at large publics out of New York State, and then the financial aid. So let's start with liberal arts colleges. So in order for this to make sense, let's just first talk about what is liberal arts. That term is thrown around a lot. And what is liberal arts college? So liberal arts in general are subjects that don't lead to a vocation or career in itself. So it would include everything from math, physics, chemistry, biology to English, history, sociology, anthropology, music, art history, art, etc. It would not include things like engineering would not be a liberal arts, nor would nursing, education, or business. So these schools, the liberal arts colleges, focus on the liberal arts, and it's just worth pointing out that, like for example, the Ivy Leagues, just to mention them, probably 80 or 90% of students at those schools study liberal arts. The difference is the liberal arts colleges only have liberal arts, so there's a focus on liberal arts, so they don't have the other subjects like engineering or business, and they don't have graduate schools. Here's a picture that they tend to be very beautiful. They tend to be in very pretty locations, historic campuses. This is actually a photograph of Bowdoin College, one of my favorites. It's in Maine. So they don't get the attention. Let me take a step back and kind of look at these three categories. We're going to look at the two of them today. Okay, so the liberal arts colleges that we're going to look at, these guys here. So they have about 2,000 students. So they're quite a bit smaller than the private research universities, and obviously quite a bit smaller than the flagship publics. So, but that has a lot of advantages. So each category has pros and cons. Otherwise, they wouldn't be around. There are advantages and disadvantages, and that's why each student it behooves every family and every student to investigate this because you don't want to leave any stone unturned. You only go through this process once, hopefully once. You get into the college you like, you're happy there, you thrive, you grow, you're building your future career, and you're going to stay there for 4 years and graduate. That's the optimal result. So what are liberal arts colleges besides what I mentioned before? They don't have graduate schools. They tend to be a little bit more homogenous because they are smaller, but that could be an advantage, but you kind of find your niche. They have diversity, believe me, but since they're smaller, it can't be as diverse. The student faculty ratio is small. And one of the things is for most liberal arts colleges, students live on campus for either 3 or 4 years, unlike the other schools, which might be 1 or 2 years. Later, we'll talk about the flagship publics. So they're much larger. They have at least 15,000 students. And each state typically has one or two or three um, flagship publics, and there are other smaller ones, but the flagship ones are the most prestigious. Okay, so just to show you how important the liberal arts colleges are in the U.S. News rankings, which is definitely the gold standard. There's no question about it. That is a very, very good resource, even though it's gets criticized a lot. It is something that all the colleges pay very close attention to, jockeying for position on the U.S. News and the lists. There are two lists actually, two parallel lists for universities, national universities, and liberal arts colleges. So there's kind of like almost inequality between them, even though they're not as well publicized. This list, actually, I culled the list from U.S. News Report. I kind of like presented it in a way that's easy to read, and that's going to be in the document I'll provide at the end. Okay, let's talk about this for a moment. So why would you go to a liberal arts college? Okay, if well, clearly they're less well known, that doesn't mean that they're not as viable or as desirable. They tend to be a better value, and because they're less well known, they have an advantage that you can for a typical student, it's somewhat easy to get into to a liberal arts college of comparable quality to a national university because they do get less attention. So you get a lot of value there. Financial aid is comparable to the elite universities. It's often excellent. The class sizes tend to be smaller. And since the research is done, there's no graduate schools in the liberal arts colleges, it actually provides more opportunity for students to do research because the professors most of them do research, but since it's not centered on graduate students, it's centered on it makes it more accessible because there's more opportunities. Graduate students don't have dibs, so undergraduates can get a lot more opportunity to do research, and you could often do it in the first year. And there's more emphasis on teaching. Okay, so this is a point that I often make to parents to kind of sell them on public school uh, uh, families. So liberal arts colleges are overlooked. So the big public school, high schools, the specialized schools, Hunter, Townsend Harris, etc. Only 5% of students wind up enrolling in liberal arts colleges. But the elite private high schools, like the Dalton, Collegiate, Horace Mann, Fieldston, the very good schools, it's almost 50%. That tells me when I learned that statistic, it didn't surprise me. What it tells me is that these parents who are paying a lot of money and have typically been paying a lot of attention to college admissions for a long time. So the people who are savvy, they know about these liberal arts colleges, and therefore they're directing their children to go there. So it is something that gets overlooked. This statistic really bothers me. So I always try to promote them because they're great opportunities. And that's to say, when you develop a list of say 10 colleges, you could all 10 it could be liberal arts colleges. No, I mean the ideal depends on the student. So every student should at least investigate it. But I would say on average, if you do your homework, I think you should have at least two or three out of the 10 liberal arts colleges, maybe one or two flagship publics, and then the rest could be private universities. Here's some of my favorites that I have the most experience with that I can recommend. And some of them are very hard to get into. So it's just like everything else. It runs the gamut in terms of difficulty. But at the end of the day, you want to go apply to a college where you find the biggest fit. Those who have attended some of my earlier presentations have probably picked up that theme. Success in college admissions in this college admissions journey is often benefited from finding the right fit. Where would you genuinely, honestly think that you'll thrive? Not the most prestigious school, not the cheapest school. Where will you feel that you'll grow the most, that you'll be happiest? And that requires a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's worth the investment of the time and effort. I'm just here helping you with the tools to do that, but I can never do that from a webinar. If we to see you privately, yes, that's different. We can help. But ultimately, it's something that only the student can make that choice. So Amherst, Wesleyan in Connecticut, Vassar, Haverford, Barnard, of course, Skidmore, Lafayette, Connecticut College. These are all the ones in the Northeast. There are obviously schools throughout the Midwest, but obviously many parents and families prefer in the Northeast. So these are just some of the schools. And just to prove how liberal arts colleges are overlooked, I bet a lot of these names parents have not heard of. So that just goes, and these are all great schools, but they're smaller, so they don't have the name recognition. That doesn't mean they're not good, because I will promise you these are great schools. Okay, let me switch to flagship publics and repeat something I said earlier about what those are. So like for example, just to give you an example, the state of Pennsylvania. Well, I use New York. I talked about it last week. So New York has three flagship publics. It's Binghamton, Stony Brook, and Buffalo. But they have 14 other campuses that do liberal arts, and then they have technical campuses, et cetera. So there's many campuses, but only three flagships. In Pennsylvania, there are two flagships: Penn State and Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. New Jersey has one, Rutgers. So each state has at least one. The smallest states tend to have one only, and the largest states like California have several. Okay, so so if you're in state, if you live in the state, for example, of Maryland, their flagship is the University of Maryland in College Park. There are advantages to being in state because you get a lower tuition because it's funded by the state. So here's what I'm talking about right now is that only some states have elite options. So there's only a handful of states that have public universities that actually draw a lot of out-of-state students and are ranked very high. So I'm going to focus on those. Though there are many other options, and I'll talk about that. So these are just some. There are quite a few. I would say maybe like 15, 20. Depends on what your interests are. Every person is different. So they get about 15 to 40% are out-of-state students. So if you're applying from New York and you're applying, for example, to the University of Virginia, you would be in that what is it, 33%. So they're a little bit harder to get into from out of state, but these schools are worth it. They're really excellent places to go to school. And again, you'd have to visit the school, and everyone is different to make a judgment. So these are just some numbers to compare, and these are ranked very high, as you can see in the rankings. Any questions so far? If you please chat them. I'm looking at the chat. There are no questions, but I would appreciate that. But if I'm missing something, or I'm not making sense. Okay, so let me talk about the pros and cons of flagship publics. I mentioned about the edge admissions. So in-state students would have an edge, which makes sense. I mean, it's funded by the state, though they welcome out-of-state students. Many of them really encourage it. Famously, Michigan has been a huge school for New York State. New York State is the largest student population outside of course, the state of Michigan itself. Of course, publics are larger than privates. The 15,000. Many of them, most of the elite ones are 30,000 plus. Like Michigan is 32,000. Maryland is 34,000. University of Virginia is a little bit smaller. It's about 18,000. The SUNYs, by the way, are about the big SUNYs. Binghamton, Stony Brook, are about 15 or 16,000, so a little bit smaller. Now, because they're public colleges and they're so large, they create these smaller communities that make it feel smaller, like they're called living learning communities and residential colleges. They're also honors programs. So each of these large colleges have a lot of options. And because they're larger, they have economies of scale. So they can offer more things. There are more clubs. There's more theater. There's more art. There's a lot more going on. One thing I will say, this is from a personal perspective. One thing about the public colleges, these flagship publics, there's something different about them. If you visit them, I think you'll feel it. There's something very grounded about it because it's public. They have to take from a very, very wide diversity of socioeconomic diversity. And there's something about that makes it somewhat appealing. You won't find any arrogance there at all, no matter how prestigious it is. So that could appeal to many students. Okay, so there's a separate slide just on this because I could not be fair if I didn't make this word of caution. So I'm talking now about out of state flagship state universities. There's a problem, and that is financial aid. And the problem is somewhat nat natural to see. They're state schools, so it's funded largely by the state themselves, by tax money. So they're generous to in-state students, but not to out-of-state students. So number one, the out-of-state tuition is significantly higher, typically about 3 times higher, and they're very stingy with aid. So if you do need financial aid, it's going to be tough. So this is something I want to add. So that sounds really bad. However, it's the out-of-state tuition is still quite a bit less than the privates. So the out-of-state rate, Maryland, this is like actually a typical example. That's why I cited here. So the out-of-state is 40,000, which is a heck of a lot less than 65,000. So the schools like Northeastern, Tulane, University of Rochester, Cornell, they're going to be 65 roughly. So that is a lot cheaper. So if you don't need financial aid, or if you qualify for a small amount of financial aid only, then these become financially competitive. One other thing I add: when you apply to these schools, you have to go early action. There is an advantage, and then to get the merit scholarships, which they do give out some. I mean, it's not a whole lot, but they do give them out. Generally speaking, is really you have to apply early action. So early action for these schools are generally in November, typically. Okay. Okay. So let me just talk about the balanced college list. So again, you want to have at the end a mix of privates, flagship publics, and liberal arts colleges, ideally. Of course, some students may hate the idea, or they want to be engineers. That's completely everyone. Like I said, everyone's different. If you want to be an engineer, almost every liberal arts college has an alliance with a university that offers engineering. But if you're really dead set on engineering, something like that, or like pharmacology or nursing or something of that nature, then liberal arts colleges would not be a good choice. But I just want to offer it out there that there are wonderful opportunities and wonderful schools, and the students do really well when they graduate in their careers. So this is kind of my kind of like ideal, I should say, of the target list. It should be 10 to 12 colleges, one safety, 5 to 8. So the lion's share of the list should be target colleges, and 1 or 2 reach colleges. Obviously, this is just sort of like one ideal target, but obviously it's flexible. Okay, some other thoughts to share about the college list. This is why I was saying about 10 to 12 colleges, because if you really do your homework about that fit business, that you want to find the school that's the best fit, it'd be very hard to find more than 10 or 12 colleges where the student would genuinely be happy at. So if the student really does their research, visits the school, uses all the resources that are available, the FIST guide, YouTube videos with dorm tours and day in the life of College Confidential. There are some great websites, forums, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to people, visit the school, sit in on a class. It'd be hard pressed to come up with more than 10 or 12 where you really feel the fit. So the college list is not the place to do your homework later. You want to do your homework first, develop the college list. That's a big idea of mine. Okay, so of course, I just want to emphasize 2 friendly chat questions. Okay. Okay, so the parent, I'm just taking one quick question here. Yia is asking, parents who are divorced have residency in different states but share custody 50-50. Would the state college consider the child in state as long as one parent is a resident? No, generally speaking, the child will be in the state that they went to high school in, actually. And it's very hard to establish residency because obviously if you're out of state, you go to an out of state school. There's a lot of students in your situation. Texas has like a strange law that if you buy any property there, you can be considered in-state. But most, it's very tricky to get the in-state rate. It's where the student resides. And I was asking, repeat the difference between liberal arts colleges and other colleges. So liberal arts college, that's a good question because it's a big distinction. So liberal arts colleges have only 2,000, remarkably, they're almost all about 2,000 students. It's a 4-year college and there's no graduate school. So all the teachers are just teaching undergrads. And it's teaching just liberal arts. So liberal arts, again, are like mathematics, physics, English, history, art history, music. That's the liberal arts. They're not vocational, so it would not include things like engineering, nursing, or business. So liberal arts colleges. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to financial aid. Again, this is again a short version. This is a 30-minute version of financial aid, but on June 5th, I'm going to get into all the detail. How it works, how do they make decisions, where do they gather the information. But I'm going to touch on it here, and hopefully this will answer a lot of questions. Try to cover the bulk of it here. Okay, so this starts off, take a step back. It starts off with this scary number, especially for folks who are sending their students to public school for primary and secondary school. You pay nothing. So all of a sudden, you get this scary number. A good private school is going to cost north of $80,000. That's a scary number. However, colleges are unique in that they actually pay you to go there. So this is kind of a once in a lifetime thing that colleges are making it affordable to get a great education and to form the foundation for your career. So the question is going to become, how do you pay for this? So just to give you some numbers, on average, selected private colleges, that's like a top 50 or 80 or 100 college, it's about $85,000 per year. At the flagship publics, it averages 50,000 or 60. And at SUNY, even it's 35,000. This includes room and board, full price. Those are very expensive. Okay, so the good news is right off the bat, like I was saying, colleges make it affordable, as does the government. So there are a lot of programs that exist, mechanisms that exist to make it work. And I've worked with many students, many families, and at the end of the day, it works out. It does. So have faith. Okay, so let me just kind of talk about some of the basic numbers, and I'm going to go over some basic vocabulary in financial aid, and then we'll talk some more details. So, first of all, those numbers are scary, but most families do not pay the sticker price, the full price. 60% of families receive financial aid, and that's at the selective colleges. Overall, it's even higher, but at selective colleges, it's 60% of families receive financial aid. The average need-based grant is $40,000 at selected private colleges. That's the average. Okay, so let me go over some of these terms. So in order for what I'm going to say next to make any sense, we have to go over these terms, and I'm going to go over each one slowly in the next few slides. And then I'm going to talk about how to get the money and how does it work. So let me go over these 4 terms. So I'm going to talk about expected family contribution. This is actually a term or concept that a lot of parents have a lot of trouble with. Like you're used to sending your child to public school and you haven't paid anything. So, what you expect to pay for college doesn't seem reasonable. But you'll soon see, we're going to talk about this, there are 2 methods that colleges use to determine this number. And one's the federal government, which is they're basically the federal government is acting in the interest of private citizens. So they're going to act in your interest. And then the other is a private method called the CSS profile. So it's basically it's what based on your entire financial situation, what you can afford to pay each year for your child's education. Okay, net price. We're going to go into a whole bunch of slides for that. That's a legally defined term. So it's the amount that you pay. It's this full sticker price minus grants. Grants, of course, are financial. That's the gold standard is grants. So grants are not loans. So there's grants and there's loans. So grants you don't pay back. Cost of attendance, that term comes up. That's the full price. That's everything in there. Room, board, tuition, travel, books, etc. Okay, let me get into some details about this to make it more sense because it is kind of complicated. So you need to be savvy about this. That's why I'm not wasting your time. It's important to really understand these terms here. So cost of attendance, we just talked about that. That's everything in. That's the all-in price. That's what you end up paying. So this is an example. So here you have a private college that's 75,000. Cost of attendance. That's the sticker price. So those are the three components right there. Most of it is tuition. Okay. Most of it is tuition. So let me break this down another way. So it's a big number, but there is help here. Okay, so this slide here, let me go back. So you start with the cost of attendance, 75,000. It's a scary number. So the numbers are crunched by these two financial aid forms, which I'm going to talk a little bit about more in a few slides. They're going to crank out the main purpose is to crank out this one number, expected family contribution. So say, for example, your financial situation determines that you can only afford to pay 25,000 a year. So there's a gap. Now you have a gap, right? Of 50,000. When you get when the student is accepted into a college, pretty much usually at the same time you get the letter of admission, you will also get a financial aid package. The financial aid package has to address the 50,000, and they all do. And that's not to say they're going to just say, "Oh, here's the 50,000 as a grant." That could happen. At the better schools, it does. But at most schools, it's going to be a package of different components. So it's going to be a mix of the need-based grants. It could be state or Pell grants. There's scholarships, federal student loans, plus loans, work study. So I'm going to talk about these in the next few slides and on June 5th in a lot more detail. Okay. Let me go on here. I'm going to stop here. Okay, so the question is, how do colleges determine how much you can afford to pay? And that's what I was saying before about the expected family contribution. So we talked about this. Now you can see it again. So there are these two forms. The CSS is primarily private colleges. The publics, generally speaking, don't use it because the publics, basically their attitude is they don't give financial aid because the in-state discount is their financial aid. So it's very hard to get past that. That was a topic that came up last week when I was talking about the SUNYs. 400 colleges take the CSS out of 2,000. The FAFSA is required for every school, even if you don't need financial aid. By the way, this question comes up over a lot. You still fill it out, and the reason is that would qualify you for things like work study, which are just jobs on campus, because the work study is actually funded by the federal government. So you would want to fill out the FAFSA, and applying for aid never hurts your chances. Just applying for it doesn't. So the CSS is a longer form. So it's going to take more time, and there are a lot of getting expert help is actually useful. We do it also. Kweller Prep provides that service because there's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of thought and strategy that goes into it, and it could save a lot of money. So you want to be very careful filling this out within the law, but there are ways of expressing income and handling this form. So you're probably all familiar with FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. As you probably know, they overhauled it 2 years ago. It was not a successful rollout, but they've since fixed a lot of it. The key is it's actually simple to fill out because you're required to agree to have. They have a back-end link between FAFSA and the IRS. So you agree to have your tax forms uploaded. They don't place much emphasis on assets, and they don't ask anything about your home equity at all, whereas the CSS is much more detailed. So the CSS will ask those questions. The CSS is a much longer form. So they get into a lot of the weeds when it comes to financial your assets. Of course, they talk about your income as well. Okay. So let me see here. Let me just take a short break. I'm just looking at some questions. Excuse me. Um, the webinars are recorded. I could ask Francis about that, to actually to send the link to all the attendees. So that's very doable. A parent is asking about that. How is flagship publics different from non-flagships? So non-flagships, you would generally would never go to out of state for a non-flagship because they're still pricey, they're still pricey, but there's very little value. It's going to be much more if you want to go to a state school to go in state. So they're not like have the prestige or the depth or rigor. Um, so a flag like in state, it would be something like Plattsburgh. Those aren't bad schools, but they're not at the same rigorous level as the flagships. So Plattsburgh, New Paltz, Oneonta. In Pennsylvania, for example, East Stroudsburg State. Um, okay. Okay, let me go on here. Thank you for those questions. Okay, so let's talk about financial aid packages. So there's a cost of attendance, the expected family contribution, and there's financial needs. So we touched on that, what the financial aid package is composed of. Now, this is an interesting slide because this tells you this very important correlation between the selectivity of the college and the quality of the financial aid package. So in each of these three examples, what I've tried to do is give like this is supposed to be like an illustration. The FAFSA, the the EFC is $25,000 in each case. So I'm here. So in each case, this is the same. This block here is the same. So at the most selective colleges, think Ivies, the Dukes, the Northwesterns, the Vanderbilts. Everything else is in a need-based grant. So they have a policy. These schools, these elite schools, there's only about 30 or 40 colleges that have this policy, where whatever your need is, they give it to you all as a grant. So they have no loan policy. That's the gold standard because that won't keep anyone out of school, and the ideal would be not to have any debt when you graduate. So not too many schools can afford that because obviously that's very expensive. So the best schools are the best because they attract the best students, including those who can't afford it. Um, and then as you move down, they start filling in with more loans, or merit aid, and you can see the loans can get bigger as you go down. As the school gets less prestigious, or the endowment, you want to think of as the endowment is smaller. And that the endowment and things like that are correlated to the prestige, of course. So that's an important observation about financial aid. Okay, this concept of need blind versus need aware. So only about 10% of the private colleges are need blind. So what does need blind mean? So for private colleges, need blind, this is like a wonderful thing if you're able to um, be admitted to one of these great schools. So this would include all 8 of the Ivies, for example. Many liberal arts colleges, like the top 10, are need blind. Um, so need blind means that your financial need does not influence the decision whether you're admitted or not. One thing I will say about need aware is it's not really binary, even though this graph makes it seem like it. So need aware for the schools that just miss being need blind, so the amount of impact on your financial on your being admitted is just very small. But if you need a lot of financial aid, that can have an impact. Will it take your chances out? Absolutely not. And it's usually a small difference. Maybe it depends upon the situation, but it could be as small as just a 10% or a 20% decrease in your chance of getting it. There's another graph that kind of illustrates that. So this graph is illustrating what I've just said here. So it's a different element to it. Let me describe what I'm talking about. So Oh, by the way, let me go back to the previous slide actually, because this is private. I wanted to emphasize this is private colleges. Public colleges in state are need blind for in-state students, like all the SUNYs are need blind. Okay, so this slide here is talking about how selectivity of a college affects the quality of the financial aid package. This is related to this slide. Excuse me, this slide here. Notice the green. So notice the green part of the financial aid package is shrinking as the school gets less selective. That's what this is saying. Basically the same thing. This is private colleges. So students out there, study hard because it has a financial benefit to it as well as anything else. So let me talk about the net price. Now we're going to the net price now. So there's a net price example, okay? So the net price is what the family has to pay. It's actually a legally defined term by the federal government because there's something called a net price calculator, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But you could find the net price. So let me repeat this. So the net price is the amount that the parents have to pay. So that includes loans, it includes work study. So in other words, if that's part of what you have to pay, that's part of the net price. So, as you can imagine, a lot of schools may want to change the definition to say that your net price is smaller because of the grants, and we're going to give you, for example, a work study or a direct federal loan. No, it's only grants that you don't have to pay back less the sticker price. So if you look at these two slides here, I'm just focusing on the net price now. So once you have the net price, this is the bill you're gonna have to pay. You're gonna have to come up with this money. So there are ways of paying for it, obviously from savings. This federal direct loans, formerly called Stafford loans, work study program, where students get a job on campus. 529 plans and plus loans are just to mention some of them, of the ways of paying this. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So let me talk about the net price calculator. So this is a tool that, if you're not familiar with it, it's a wonderful required resource that every single college must have by federal law, and it must be on the website since 1985. So it's really powerful, and it must be accurate. And it doesn't take long to fill it out. Most colleges will have two versions of it, the long version, the short version, so you can spend time on it and compile your own list. So obviously each family situation is unique. So I would suggest even making a little spreadsheet of each college. I'm going to give you an example of something similar to what I'm just saying in a few moments, but go to 6 colleges. Go to all the colleges that your student really likes, or explore them, and it'll tell you how much you'll wind up paying. So that's what I was saying before. Can you find out? Yes. How do you find out? The net price calculator. So there's 2 ways you can find it. If you do in the search box and this is the example from Wesleyan University in Connecticut. If you just type in the search, it'll come up right away. Net price calculator right off the bat. Typing it in, or if you search, it's going to be under missions and aid. So every single college will have a tab. I'm just getting ahead of myself here. Every college will have a tab in this example here, and then once you click on that tab, it'll be under financial aid, and then search around for it. By the way, that leads me to an observation that the websites really are wonderful to learn about the school and also to get a feeling for the personality of the school, because the school's incented to educate young people and parents about what the school offers, because they themselves also want the student that's going to be happy there, because the worst situation is the student's not happy and have to transfer, that they really try to avoid that. So yeah, please spend time on the websites and college websites. Okay, this is just an example of one, just an example of $100,000 income, assets about 150,000, not including your home. So just the point I'm making on this graphic is look at the variation of the net price. The net price again is the amount you have to pay, whether it's through loans or whatever. This is the amount you have to pay. Look at the variation. It's extraordinary. By the way, the state universities are for in-state residents. But all the other schools I have listed here, oh, except for Stony Brook, because we're in state for Stony Brook, but they're all private colleges other than that. So you can see there's quite a bit of a range. So that's a factor. Money matters, right? So you want to evidently, sorry, at the end of the day, you want to have a combination of the money and the fit and the quality of the schools. There's a lot of variables that go into this process. Okay. All right, let me talk about this now. So I'm going to give you two slides back to back. So don't take this first slide completely literally. So I want to compare four different types of colleges. Total cost. Now, before I even say another word, total cost is not what most parents pay. So if you look at this, you say, who wouldn't go to a SUNY? It's so much cheaper. Of course, there are other factors involved besides that, but based on price alone, it doesn't look good for the other schools. But when you consider, so the yellow bars are the net price. So I use as an example 100,000 in income, typical assets. Look at the difference. The actual SUNY is comparable in price to an Ivy League or even a school ranked in the 50 to 70 range. So don't just discount price. Again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that in financial aid, in the world of financial aid, world of colleges, I should say, they really make it affordable. They really go out of their way to make it affordable. And again, with the public flagships, if your income is maybe different, it could actually be a better value. So this example is only for $100,000 in income, but everyone's situation is different. Public state flagships can be less expensive because the tuition is so low compared to privates. Okay, so you got the bill. Now you know your net price. Say you're at the stage, you found that your net price, your student is into college. How do you pay for it? So of course, you get the financial aid package, but you want to prepare in advance, of course. So there are multiple sources that are available to pay the bill. So I wanted to display it this way: parent contributions and student contributions. Now, every family has their own sense of what is fair. I'm personally a believer that it's better for the student to have some responsibility. It's also teaching them about money and value, and it may incent students to work hard because if they have to pay for it, they're more likely to put more effort in, possibly. Everyone is different. But anyway, I divide it this way. So family contributions, of course, you have the family savings. It can come out of your income. It can come out of your assets. It can come out of just your private savings, your Schwab account, whatever. I mean, you've been saving money for a long time, hopefully, so there's money available. There's 529 plans, which are just designed just for that. I'm going to talk about 529 plans on June 5th in a lot of detail. But basically, every state has it. New York State has it, of course. They're very, very extremely generous because the interest earned, you don't pay taxes on. You can't say that about many things. As long as you pay for a qualified expense, which would include tuition. And it can be passed on generation to generation. I mean, it has a lot of advantages. And the plus loans are also available. The federal loans, they have lower interest rates. Student contributions. So the biggest one for student contributions, obviously they have their own money, but usually if they have jobs, it's not going to amount to that much. But yes, they have some money. The biggest one is the direct loans. So those used to be called Stafford loans. So they're subsidized. I'm going to talk about that the very next slide. Work study. So many students have jobs, whether they're a teaching assistant, they're working at the library or the dining center. Typically, it's about $2,500 a year. It's a federal program. And private scholarships, which I'll talk about also on June 5th. So actually, it's hard to get private scholarships, but they're available, especially if you have an employer working for a large company. They're pretty good about it. Okay, let me go back to what I was saying before. So let me just go to the previous slide here. So just to put this in the right perspective, um, I'm talking about the first one, direct federal loans on the student contribution. So the reason why I call it a student contribution, when a student takes out these loans, it's in the student's name, and the student is the promise has to sign a promissory note. So it's not for the parent. This is a student loan, and it's called a direct loan. It goes directly to the school, not the student. So it's used by the school. It's part of the financial aid package. So it's going to help to pay the bill, the tuition or the room board. So the student actually usually doesn't see the money itself. So the number on the bottom here is the best. There are two forms of the loan. The the lower on the bottom is subsidized, meaning that the interest does not accrue. So the federal government actually pays the interest while you're in college and for the first 6 months after you graduate. And then each year you're entitled to take 2,000 unsubsidized. Now, subsidized just means that the loan doesn't accrue, but the interest rate is subsidized. So it's actually a fairly low interest rate. I think it's about 6% or something like that. So it's much lower than any other kind of unsecured loan. So notice it can't even amount to that much, which if you add all these numbers together, it's still a very manageable number, 10, like about $25,000, $30,000 total. Okay, this is like a cheat sheet. This kind of summarizes. I'm going to include this and a lot of other details in a document that I'm going to chat to you at the end. So this is sort of like summarizing all the financial aid that's available. So the lion's share, the aid, if you go to private colleges, the lion's share is these need-based grants. There's also merit aid. Most of the top colleges don't provide merit aid because if you need, you're getting a need-based, right? So merit aid is a tricky subject because merit aid is used by colleges to try to attract students that would not normally necessarily go there. But they have their own algorithms to see what other colleges, competitive colleges, the student is getting into. So if they feel like, oh, this student may go to a school that perhaps is more selective, then they start to sweeten their offer using merit aid. So merit aid is sort of like a game. They have money to play with. They use it to draw students in, the better students in. But it's widely available. So, it's a question of will you get 10,000, 20,000, 40,000? I mean, that's the difference. It's pretty widely used at a lot of colleges, but the amount varies depending on your record, your grades, and your whole application. Go on here. Okay, so I just want to remind you about this. This is going to be really good. So June 5th, mark your calendars. Thursday at 7, as usual. So I'm going to cover a lot of details that I didn't have time for today. But we're going to talk about going into the detail of the CSS and FAFSA, actually trying to fill that out and getting a sense of what it is and some of the strategies. The implication of flying financial aid, more details about how it may impact admissions. How do colleges decide about the financial aid packages? What are some details about that? And then we talk about more about like how the 529 plans work, the plus loan system, private scholarships. I'm going to give a cheat sheet on that. Merit scholarships and negotiating. A lot of parents don't realize it's actually negotiable once you get in. So financial aid, again, the financial aid package, you find out after you're admitted. Typically, you'll have multiple financial aid packages, but you'll get into typically, say, 4 or 5 or more colleges. So they're competitive. So let me, before I forget, I can do this right now. This is going to be the list of all the links, including the ones from the first three presentations. So let me chat that to you right now. So here we go. So this is going to be the links to shared docs. Okay, so copy that link down. And let me take some, I'll go back here. So I'm going to take some questions. So I'm going to read the questions here. So Marina is asking, for a family with twins going to college at the same time, does the EFC get split in half for each child applicant? That's a very good question. The answer is, in effectly, the EFC roughly speaking, the way it works is that if say you have an EFC of say 20,000, that means if you had one child, you have to pay 20,000. If you have two children, you have to pay, roughly speaking, it's not exact because they're factoring in the child will be living at home and getting, there's costs involved with that too, right? It would be split 10,000, 10,000. So yeah, it would be split. Do all students get the subsidized $35,000 portion of the federal direct loan, or do only the ones who qualify for it? Almost everyone qualifies for that. Very few people won't qualify for that loan. So it's what you want. So let's say you could qualify. A lot of people don't request the loan. So how much of the money you want is up to the student, for first year students, up to $5,500. You can have any amount, the full amount, or any fraction. So that's in the financial aid package. So you don't really apply for the loan per se. So when you apply to college and you're admitted, you get a financial aid package. In the package, they'll make a recommendation for loan. You can turn it down. I would accept it. I'd usually recommend acceptance. You absolutely do not have to accept it. They're going to typically recommend the full amount, the full 5,500 typically. The plus loan. So the plus loan program is actually it's collateralized by the federal government. So because the interest is going to be lower, you do have to qualify for it, but it's a pretty low bar. You could take the plus loan, can go up to the amount of the cost of the college, the parents' cost of the college. So it doesn't include like a grant. So it's the difference between the grant money and the cost of attendance would be the total amount you can do in a plus loan. So a plus loan kind of is a private parent loan in a way, but it's better because it's the federal government is backing it, so the interest rate is better. EFC is expected family contribution. Yokako is answering that question. So it's the amount that the CSS and the FAFSA determined was appropriate that you can afford to pay for your child's education. Subsidized versus unsubsidized for the 50. So the 5,500, it's just 2,000 of the 5,500 is unsubsidized, meaning that the interest does accrue, and the other 3,500 is subsidized, so you don't pay the interest until you graduate. And you could take any of the full amount or any part of that amount. It's if you're going through this for the first time, it's a very daunting experience. It's very exciting. There's a lot of challenges for the student going through it, and then you have the financial aid element to have to worry about. But it is the greatest thing. College is the greatest thing, especially if you go out of you're living on campus, because it's like, to me, college is the perfect bridge between living at home and then independent living, because it's sort of supervised. You're being supervised. You're building skills for your career. You're making friendships, learning social skills and career skills. So it's really magnificent. So it's whatever the cost, it's worth it. And again, let me just back up to the bigger overall picture about this, is that it's worth. Colleges really try to make it work out. They really do. They're just basically very generous. So have faith. I hope this was all that I was able to communicate this in a clear way. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week. So next week is on writing the essays and the supplementals and strategies and how admissions officers read them. And there's a lot of interesting insights into the essay process, because it's different than writing an essay for like your English class or for the school newspaper. So I'm kind of emphasizing that. So I'll see you all next Thursday, 7 p.m. Have a good night. Take care, everyone.